com. You can find us at the401show.com as well. This is episode 8. Why is NASA so controversial? Welcome, welcome. Raina, welcome once again to the show. How you doing today?
Hello, Raina. I can't see you,
You
but
got it, you got it.
I
Hey,
can
Meigs,
see
how are you? Guys bring up
I'm doing
Meigs?
great.
Yeah. So we
Adjusting.
didn't get to speak with you very often last week, but we hope to spend some more time. We had quite a big show last week.
Yes, I was so excited. So much information. I'm ready for more.
It is, yeah. Dave, he really can pack a lot into a show, and that's the idea of the 401 show, so that we can kind of broaden people's idea and the things that they see and what's going on out there, and then to have everybody come in. Hey, what's up, girl? KJ's here with us. I can't hear Meigs yet. Can you guys bring Meigs up on Skype? So, how you doing, KJ?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Great to see you today. Dave is running a little late, so we figured we kick the show off. We got Miss Raina here. So what's the story, Raina? You were saying that you are into all the positivity and making people happy. What's your story? What do you do for the people?
Well, actually, I want to be a humanitarian, so I've been studying that for the last 10 years and volunteering and helping everywhere I can.
Okay.
To start working with children soon. Baby doll queen.
Very cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool, man. It's really cool to see all the different, when you get into like the radio world, all the different people that come up and have small businesses. It's kind of what all of them are, you know what I mean? And it's good to be able to promote that and have people on that are, trying to be in a positive light,
Yes, yes.
And so Meigs, we got Meigs yet? Or no, still not on?
Hey, can you
Oh.
guys hear me?
Okay, yeah, I can't hear you you're not very loud. Yeah, I can only hear you in the headphones.
Is this better?
There you are.
Hey, okay, all right.
What's up? How are you?
What's up, everyone? Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is such a cool show. I just love I love talking to you guys. It's like my therapy every week.
Aw.
Because I still don't have very many conspiracy friends in my neck of the woods here in St. Louis.
Well, we love you too.
None that have done radio shows before, at least.
Yeah, well, you will find them as you're out there on. I see you. You're on YouTube all the time, and I noticed you got quite a few thousands of likes. So people know who you are, Meigs.
Well, just like we were talking about last time, it's like once you know all this stuff, you just become so strange to the rest of the world because like once you've gone down enough rabbit holes, if you know all this stuff, but it's so weird to talk to people about it in person. So YouTube is kind of a natural progression for people that are in the truth community, because it's like you can find that small sea of people who know what the heck you're talking about and who can kind of back you up. So that was why I initially started on YouTube in the first place, and it really was like therapeutic too in the beginning, and it still is. But
Well, I notice over the last couple of weeks, I've noticed that Miss KJ and Helen, I see the stuff that they're sharing, and it just shows it that when the research starts and you start looking at some of that stuff, some stuff you understand, some stuff you're like, whoa, I don't even want to know about this stuff,
I want to know it all.
Yeah. So have you
My
found
mind
that?
devours it.
So is there anyone that you found like I like Joe Rogan. I like some of
Oh,
the.
I love Joe Rogan.
Yeah. So to just tune into one of them podcasts,
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Latest with the DMT and Alex Jones DMT.
I did see that one.
You're gonna love it, Kelly. You gotta watch it because Alex Jones, he breaks down DMT.
He sure does.
he's wearing a NASA shirt, by the way, with a rainbow on it.
Well, that was on purpose because of Eddie Bravo, because Eddie Bravo is a big, we didn't go to the moon. And I've been listening to a guy named Owen Benjamin, and he's all about we never went to the moon, too. And they bring up stuff that I can't quite explain. Now, if we leave the atmosphere and say the sun's up, if it's really like 200 degrees out, now, I don't know. Now, folks, and please, you can probably hit us up on the chat or hit us up on the Facebook page or something. What is the temperature on the moon, let's say like when the sun's up? Because I heard it was extremely hot.
Oh, really?
And then in the cold, it's extremely cold. You know, I don't know if it's like freezing, but I just wonder what those temperatures are. Because what these guys are saying is like, man, if it's just aluminum foil, it probably isn't going to make it. You know what I mean? In one of those landers, or you know, what we've seen them land on the moon with. But I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of math comes into it, a lot of physics. For me to say that it didn't happen is, you know, but they believe, you know, it's like if our phones are have way more computing power than the first space shuttles, you know, then how could they have landed that lander?
Oh my gosh. Did you see? I'm part of all these flat Earth groups on Facebook now, and it really, you know, I like to style myself as a Earth shape agnostic, but very much pro flat Earth minded. I'm flat Earth minded, but I just in reality I just question NASA a whole heck of a lot. I don't care what the shape of the Earth is. I just know that NASA's full of crap. But in my flat Earth groups on Facebook, I saw this footage of a Russian lunar lander, which you guys have to look this up, or we'll put it in the edited version of this video. But it's called the Lunokhod 1 lunar lander of the Soviet Union, and it was sent to the moon and landed in 1970 apparently. And it is like a hunk of junk. It looks like a steampunk art project.
Okay, hold on one second, Meeks. Hold on a second, Meeks. Raina, here's the thing. I don't know that did you realize you were coming into a show like this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, actually, at the
Did you
beginning
know
I
how
didn't,
freaky
but I
we
was
were,
so excited
Raina?
because I do study a lot of this information and.
Just at like random YouTube, like because how I found a lot of the stuff is just YouTube when you put it into autoplay and it would just catch all these different crazy videos.
And it'll take you
Right.
to a dark place too, so you end up seeing everything: CERN, Pizzagate.
Yes.
You go everywhere.
Well, I heard a good podcast today about CERN, and I was the way they talk about breaking it, and I know Dave brought it up too. When you break it down into what truly is matter or antimatter, it's a pretty. I've heard some. See, like you're saying, it depends on what you're looking for. Like if I went to strictly a science show about CERN, I'm sure they wouldn't tell us that, right? They would make it sound just as, you know, that it's scientific. But then you get to the next video, and the next video is like, this is what they're doing, it's demons. And you're like, holy shit. You know, it blows your mind. You know, you're like, I don't know what to believe sometimes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Meeks, what we're trying to do is get Raina's mic in check. So I just figured I'd ask you a few questions.
Science, and I know that they say dark matter is really hard to control
Man of the
and
hour.
contain.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a little scary that they're playing with that.
Well, the one I heard recently, he was saying if you have a grain,
Okay.
a grain,
louder.
you know, just truly a grain of antimatter or dark matter would be like 4 nuclear warheads.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty destructive. You know, have you seen CERN where it's got that Indian god out front of it?
No.
No. Okay, yeah. So that's
It's a
something that
rabbit
we'll have
hole I
to
have
touch
to
on.
Yeah, with the
explore.
hands, right? Is it the one?
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the
It's
hands?
the god of chaos
Yeah.
or
Destruction.
destruction.
How strange for them to put an occult figure out in front of a scientific facility, research facility that gets like billions of dollars
Well,
from all different countries for their budget, and you know, what does that say about them? You know, like, why Shiva? Why the god of destruction?
Well, the way
You know?
the preacher
I
that I
guess
was listening.
Kali is the god
Yeah.
of destruction.
Yeah, this preacher explained it that that there is another god that's in that group of gods, okay, and that when Shiva destroys, this god can recreate.
Oh, right, Brahma and Vishnu.
Exactly. Yep, it's one of
Yeah,
them.
like
I'm not sure
that.
the succession of which god is what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a trinity almost in Hinduism. Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess the point being there is that the one can recreate, and by doing CERN, what you're doing is trying to figure out the God particle, the Higgs boson particle, or whatever. But essentially, the Big Bang, and if you can, more or less, you're trying to figure out what it is, and by doing that,
Yeah, it says Brahma is the creator of the universe while Vishnu is the preserver of it. Shiva's role is to destroy the universe in order to recreate it.
Exactly.
Wow.
Wow.
So when you can figure out, say where God, it was His word. He spoke us into existence.
Someone needs to turn their volume down on their something over there.
Oh, it was one of the phones or
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt so
computers. Yeah.
abruptly.
yeah, it's just things we're starting to figure out.
Yeah.
Well,
And
and then for Freemasons, they have this order ab chao, order out of chaos. What do you call it? Idiom, or it's like a tagline. It's in the Masonic dictionary, order out of chaos, and that's kind of what the New World Order is about. They can only bring the new world into existence out of a concocted and constructed state of chaos.
there you
Right.
go. So it the way it sounds to me is the way that we're destroying nations and us recreating or putting them into the IMF banks and essentially you're back on the hook for a couple $1 billion that you're never ever going to be able to pay back. And this is the way that whoever it may be. I know we talk about political structures of liberals and Democrats and the UK, Brexit, all these different governments. That's to allow us to argue. And ultimately the elites, they've already made a decision. They're just going to allow us to argue it out and make us feel like we have a choice.
Yeah, they plan years ahead of time while we're planning for today.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I guess to try to stay on Dave's topic here with why NASA is so controversial, I think he's going to go into the names, into all the different space shuttles. There was Enterprise and, I don't know, Columbia, obviously, right? Do you know a few of those, Meeks? You guys know them?
Oh no, I don't.
Right.
Challenger?
Yeah, let me look it up. Yeah, they're kind of like named after Greek gods and stuff. And let's see.
Apollo, obviously, the Apollo missions.
54.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Those are things they do teach us in school, but you realize you don't really pay attention to them.
The shuttle Atlantis.
Atlantis.
Endeavor. Yeah. Hold on. Let me find a whole list.
Now these are Greek. Are they Greek names?
It seems like it.
The Greek girl.
Greco-Roman.
Yeah. Yeah. Are
Yeah,
they all
I'll just
Greek?
tell
Helen of Troy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavor. Yeah, it seems like there's a theme for sure.
Right.
But what really struck me is that a lot of the astronauts and a lot of employees of NASA have been Freemasons, and specifically Mormon Freemasons. And a lot of people that are in the know talk about Mormon Freemasonry being above the regular levels of Freemasonry. They go to the more occult side, actually, when it gets right down to it. And I actually went to art school with a boy who was abused in a Mormon secret society family, and he did paintings of the rituals that he was put through as a kid.
Wow.
And everybody, I just was thinking back to that not too long ago, and I was just thinking, wow, dude, like that was someone I knew that was talking about that stuff. But anyway, so it's just very strange. NASA likes to hire Mormon Freemasons. Should that perk our ears up a little bit? I just think it's interesting to look further into that. And the three most famous astronauts who did the first lunar landing, I think it was Michael Thompson, Neil Armstrong, and Buzz Aldrin. Two of them were Freemasons outwardly. I don't think the third one was, but his dad was. But they unfurled a Freemasonic flag on the moon, they said. And
They said.
Symbols to it.
Hey, Meeks, while
Well,
you're talking, do me a favor. Will you send that link to Charles's email address?
Sure.
Because you're already touching on some of the stuff that
You're
we're
waiting to get
gabbing
into?
about.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Figure we get
So what
back
have I
around
missed?
to
How
it.
you guys doing?
We're doing great. How are you today?
Yes.
How am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm in a great mood.
All right. Very good.
I feel like I'm floating. That's a chair comment, not a. So you guys are good? Everything
Yeah.
all right?
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
See? Okay, good. Yeah. So, hey, Charles, do you want to see if she sent that thing? Unless you want to tell me your password and you log in right now. Hey, America. Yeah, because I need to click on that link here, and I don't know what it is.
Sure.
CIA top secret thing.
Top secret.
I'm going
So
to send it to Charles right now.
we had one weird thing happen last week.
What's that?
Hang on.
You're gonna display. Hopefully, I don't have anything bad in my email.
Just one weird thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's pretty
Right.
good, right? Yeah.
Good week.
What
Only
what
one. If
happened?
only one weird thing happened, then that's
Yeah.
a good
What
week.
was the
right?
weird thing for you this week?
For me? Nothing really weird.
Something weird happened this week, man. Don't you remember?
My whole life is kind of weird, so it's weird to other people may
Right, like,
not be
how
that
weird?
weird to me. So
Yep.
How we doing that on that email, Meigs? Do you guys know that
Sent it right-
Charles has
right now, just sent it.
172,000 unread emails?
Really.
wow. See, now we're all up in your business.
Yep.
See?
Yeah. You don't want to get spammed. You
Wait
just
a minute,
keep
what's
some-
this? Hair Club for Men.
Oh, very funny. Penile
Customer of the
enlargement
month.
pills.
I'm kidding, folks. I'm kidding. This is what
Didn't-
you get when you help me, as I embarrass you on air. All right. So, NASA. Does anyone here not understand the concept of NASA being controversial?
The concept.
I mean, if we ever heard, I just want to make sure we've all in our lives have at least come across once
Oh, sure.
NASA. There's something weird going on in NASA.
I mean, the only thing primarily that I've ever looked into is like how they may have faked the moon landing and stuff like that, but I don't really know too much besides that. You have a fresh brain to lay it on.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's interesting stuff because that's like a positive conspiracy. Like,
Yeah.
why would they? Twin Towers, okay, I could understand. They're going to
Right.
cause destruction. They're bad guys. Why would they do something that makes us feel good that's an accomplishment, which may or may not have been faked? We're going to look into that.
Well, it was a big thing about the war, right, or the Cold War.
Well, that's the story they tell. Oh, we're in a race with the
Right.
Russians, and we got to beat them to spare, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
The
War
the promoting.
fuels all agenda. I mean, it's interesting because remember Werner von Braun. We're going to talk about him today because he's like right now it's the Cold War, and we'll do a show on the Cold War later. But it
Sure.
completely staged, completely. I mean, Russia should have collapsed financially, and guess who kept them propped up? Through
Was that us?
well, funny,
Was this
it
the
was the U.S. through the central bankers.
Imagine
So what
that.
happened is companies like Mobil, defense contractors, are actually doing business with Russia, selling them the very weapons that they're then giving to the North Vietnamese or the North Koreans, both wars, and they're also selling them to our soldiers. And this is this is what they're on both sides of the equation.
Got it.
They're never on a national border.
Industrial complex.
What country is always neutral in war?
Switzerland.
And where are these guys based?
Ah.
Oh, yeah.
See, there we
How,
go.
how funny
Another
can
aha
a country?
moment.
Can you just? I mean, Hitler's invading everyone in the 1930s. September 1st, 1939. He begins by invading Poland, and then he invades Austria, and he just invades. Like, how does a country just get to go? Oh, we're on Ghoul. You can't get. We're just declaring we're neutral.
Right.
What? It's like when you're about to get into a gang
When
fight,
you're
you go, "I'm neutral, guys." They will laugh you.
Oh yeah.
They will laugh your teeth right out of your mouth. Okay. Couple things. I want to give some appreciation to KJ and Meigs, and I really respect this, and I'm giving you guys some props as a message also to everyone. And there's going to be an apology woven into this, but you guys both, KJ especially, twice you came up to me and you're like, Dave, when you talk about your personal life and your ex and things, it just sounds just crappy. And I went back.
It's
and
a mama bear in me.
I listened to myself, and you were it's just not. You were right.
Very uncouth.
I was my dad would
It's
have been
uncouth.
embarrassed. It's not. It's almost like it's just a habit.
Right.
And,
Can I interrupt because a friend?
no,
of
because
mine
I'm about to say sorry. But hang on one sec. All right. Let's hear about your friend.
My friend
Now let me
listened to the
forget
entire show, and the one thing he talked about was your story that he liked. How you?
Oh,
used your
great! Just when
That's
all right.
That's the
Looks
one
like
thing
we
he
will be
promotes,
talking
yeah.
about you, Bets. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry to you guys for wasting your time on that stuff. And Bets, I'm sorry for you too. I normally like to dwell on the positive in people.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Positive.
Betsy's a good mom. She's a good, attentive, engaged mom with Brady, and he's very lucky to have her. And so let's just leave that at
Absolutely.
that.
There you go.
So thank you,
God
Meegs,
bless ya,
and thank you,
Bets.
KJ, for honestly being straight with me.
Sure.
I mean, I love just ridiculous. The
That's what
truth
friends
is
are for.
always easier than stuff.
Right.
All right, so I was going through a couple quotes last night, and I thought this one was interesting. I've always liked this one. We all know Isaac Newton, right?
I know of him.
What do you guys? What's he known for in your mind?
Newton meter? Is it measurement?
Gravity, I think. Right?
Big bars.
Meegs, you talk a little louder. Fig bar. What was that? An ad from when we were
Mine
kids?
might be that
Fig
close.
Newton.
Yeah.
Oh, a fig Newton. Like a fig bar.
He's the
Isaac
gravity
Barr.
dude.
All right. So he actually spent more time studying the scriptures in the Bible than anything else, more than mathematics, physics, philosophy, you name it. And he was very well versed and very much a believer in the Bible. I mean, there's a lot of quotes. Now we look at it, oh, he's from the 1700s. They didn't know jack anything. My argument is that this generation is actually the one that is deceived, thinking we know a lot more. But just like the Bible said, we are going to essentially be dumber than any other people that have ever been here, which I totally get. We are.
Yep.
So,
Calculators.
just by reading the scriptures, Newton made this prediction, and this was in 1687. He said, and I actually, on a personal level, I'm like, I think this would be me. Probably everyone in this room. About the time of the end, a body of men will be raised up who will turn their attention to the prophecies and insist upon their literal interpretation in the midst of much clamor and opposition. Well, I can tell you for sure the clamor and opposition is real. The literal, that is real. And, everyone used to call humanity men back then. They're used to talking about men and women.
Collective.
Basically, he's like, there's going to be a spiritual awakening right at the end. And people are going to wake up to the Bible, and suddenly all these people that are like normal people in the world are going to switch whatever they're doing, and they're going to do this because they know something.
Time is short.
So these are. Do you guys like our new little?
I just noticed that the little border around the.
Yeah. I was about to say shit's getting official, but
Wait.
I'm not swearing.
Oh. well,
Starting now.
bleep.
Sorry, no, it is.
The backstory, this is out of a book that has been written, but it's Newton is yet another brilliant scientist of his time, like Einstein for our generation, who was certain of the existence of God. He spent more time studying the scriptures than he did physics. By studying, he predicted the phenomenon which is manifesting all over Earth, really since about the early 1990s. It's not a growth in religion; it's a growth in people are waking up. And there's some groups that actually study this. Look into Barna, and we'll get into that later. He also talked about how there's going to be this explosion of knowledge in the last days, and he got that out of the Book of Daniel. It was written 2,000 years before him.
Newton.
It was written
in-
600 BC.
Hold on. Newton found the passages in Daniel or in prophecies?
Well, Daniel is a very prophetic book.
Okay.
And that Daniel goes back to 600 or so BC from Babylon. And what he predicted about the future, Daniel writes that, essentially in the next 600 years, the Babylonians are going to fall. Then the Persians are going to, Medio-Persia is going to rise, which happened. Okay, pretty good. 1 for 1. Then he also said the Greeks are going to rise and conquer the Persians. That happened. He even didn't mention them by name, but said this young king, this is Alexander the Great, is going to conquer a whole bunch of stuff, but then his kingdom won't hold and is going to be divided into 4 pieces. Strange prediction for, 600 BC. We flash forward, and it's exactly the king dies young. He doesn't bequeath his kingdom to anyone. His top 4 generals take over the 4 parts. They end up kind of warring with each other. Split into 4. They lose their power base. Now come the Romans. And he then also predicted that Rome won't be conquered, but it will go hidden. Its power base will remain intact. Now, to say this 600 years before Christ, and to be able to now have the information we have to go back and see that this, in fact, did happen just as it was written, and it was 600 BC. We now know this. Mm-hmm. And there's thousands of examples like that. It's incredible.
Man. See, just stop for a second. That's what I mean, coming as a student is because even reading it, I don't see it. I can't link it to something that happened. Like
That's
watching it through. Yeah, you have to make sure that you're constantly seeking.
There's a line in there somewhere. It says, I'm going to screw up the line, and maybe Meigs, you can figure it out, but it's somewhere along the lines of, it's for God to hide treasures and kings to seek them out. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's more design in that book, because you can't, and this might have a lot to do with why God doesn't come down and do a light show for us, because that'd be so easy. But it's counterfeitable, but, it'd be easy. Like if Jesus showed up in my bedroom tonight and I believed it was him, I would do whatever he said.
Right.
Go over to Helen's house and steal all her money. All right, if you say so.
Gotta do what I gotta do.
I am.
Oh, it's Proverbs 25:2.
What is this?
It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings is to search things out.
So that's God's way of saying that he's hidden a lot of little nuggets. And it's unbelievable because it's only been in modern day, now that we've got the ability to crunch numbers, because God has got messages buried underneath the surface of the Bible. So do you guys know what letter skipping sequences are? So if you take, like, for instance, every 7th letter of a message, it has a message inside of it that someone doesn't know unless they're looking, what does every 7th letter,
Right.
He's got messages like that all over this book.
Ooh.
That it's just one of the many, many indicators when you look at the mathematical probability that this was written by a man and these numbers tie up so perfectly. Mm-hmm. It's another thing that establishes the fact that this thing was not written by humans. Well, he operates in 7s. So you've got conventions of 7 for almost everything. And what happens is I'm not going to give a good example. And Meigs, if you can think of one, go for it. But one prophet, he'll be talking about 3 of the 7 units. Another prophet, he'll be talking about 2 of the 7 units. And another prophet, he'll be talking about 2 of the other. And it's cumulatively, I know one. In the New Testament, book of Matthew, very specifically says that they went fishing. And Meigs, do you remember the number of fish they caught? 153 or 157.
Oh, I totally forgot.
Let's go with 153. I'm not sure the exact number. Doesn't mean much, right? But whenever God uses a specific number like that, there's something going on every time. And it just so happens, Jesus is doing this metaphor where he's just meeting some of his disciples, and he tells the fishermen ones, he's like, throw that net back over, because they could not catch anything. They end up catching 153 fish, which is a metaphor for them, because Jesus was going to make them fishers of men, right, not fishers of fish. And these guys ended up, when you add up the 4 books of the gospel, and you need to add all 4 books of the gospel up, written in different continents, 100 years apart, not able to cross-reference what the other guy wrote because they were wrote simultaneously. You take all of the miracles, all the saved people in the 4 gospel, it adds up to 153. And there's thousands of little signs
I
like
gotcha.
that where like,
Yeah, we're connections.
whoa. Once it could be an accident, probability.
It's like cracking the little Annie code.
But when you start to look more deeply, and basically every time there's something like that, you will go find this affirmation. And that's why guys, even like Isaac Newton, men of science and math, the world was just getting round from flat at the time.
There you go, Meeks.
And he still, he knew that the Bible, and it's happening still today at the highest scientific levels, but we never hear from those guys. We hear from Michio Kaku and Rob Greene and Bill Nye and a few guys that are just always on television as quote-unquote the voice of science.
Yeah.
But they're really just the voice of the Illuminati.
Yeah, it's just really a character role that they're playing. It is for that Nye guy. That guy's a fruitcake.
Oh gosh. And then we look down on these scientists' involvement in the occult and alchemy, but that is actually, because you can see right on Wikipedia, like Newton was involved in study of the occult and alchemy as well as, the Bible. But this didn't go away. This just went underground. These alchemical matters and, chemical transformations of metal and stuff. That's what they learn in Freemasonry and the mystery schools. They just don't teach it in our 6th grade science class,
Yeah, he was definitely an alchemist. And keep in mind also, Meigs, we also study the occult. So I wouldn't...
Doesn't mean he's bad.
I
right?
believe
He's researching.
we're going to see Isaac Newton in heaven. Victory in life versus failure. I've been trying to get this out for a few weeks. I'm just going to finish it right now. Because all I got to was what failure in life would be. Which is, if you have all the riches in the world and all the things, that the world tells you are good, from good, nice houses, nice bank accounts, good sex, and good cars, and yada, yada, yada. If you don't get to heaven, your life was a failure. And the flip side of that is, no matter what sort of curveballs have been thrown at you in this life, if you find out how to get to heaven, no matter how crappy this life has been or what sins you think you've committed, it will be a victory. And I can think of nothing more important in any individual's life. I did not get this until I was 40, whatever.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I got a great barometer now, but sometimes I think I'm either being tested or I'm indeed a sinner. That's it. You try it, but man,
We're
I'm telling you,
sinners, right?
yeah, that's it.
I look
why
at
you need
it.
'em.
I look at it as learning.
Huh?
I never sin. I'm learning. And the
Learning
more
to
that
sin?
I pay attention to God, the more I learn.
Gotcha. Yeah,
That's the way I do it. So.
yeah.
Positive thinking.
Look,
Well, I
God-
mean, even
Go ahead.
I'm just saying, very simple. I could be listening to the Gospels in the car, and then some dude cuts me off, and next thing you know, here comes 47 words out of my mouth, and then I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I just did that. You lose it like that, ready to snap on somebody, a road rage.
Sometimes on air.
Don't
Sometimes
drive
on air.
angry.
Yeah. No, you have to make a conscious effort, and then when it happens, you just you
Well, you
Say you're
gotta
sorry.
have the yin
Back
and
off.
the yang. They say if you don't know pain, you don't know pleasure. So.
Oh, without a doubt.
yeah.
And how really, God knows everything, but how could our faith or love, really for him, let's say, ever be tested if there weren't trials?
Right.
I we'll get into that later. That's very
Yep, gotcha.
philosophical,
Yep.
but that's a really good point. Something did, at least in my book, happen this week that was way strange, KJ. Can I show that? By the way, has anyone seen my friend Catherine today? This meeting?
Nope.
I think she's coming by with a gift for you. So, can I?
I'm like in the air about
Can
all
I
this.
tell
No
her-
idea what's going on?
Can I
so-
tell him this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay.
You're freaking me out,
No,
man.
remember the 3:15 a.m. text last week?
I do.
All right, so I'm having a psycho day last week.
Do I
It's-
want to admit that I remember or that I don't remember? No.
All right, so last
No.
week, all right, I'm just gonna scroll through this, and if we
Okay.
don't want it on the edited show, I'll
Okay.
take it down.
Oh,
And I'm gonna
no big
share the
deal.
text that was sent to me while I was on the phone with Meeks.
Okay.
And one of the things we were talking about was the show. Literally, like I think we were talking about you and Meeks. This was our 5-hour conversation.
It was epic.
And just so you guys stuff goes on behind the scene. There was I don't know what that was from. Like it felt like 3 a.m. to I know it was daylight
The
when we got off the
witching
phone.
hour.
Editing the shows.
So last week we were kind of teasing KJ, but not. I mean, this is actually great news for us. Where she's like, "Well, I'm giving it up to God. Let's just see what happens." And she started off by getting a package on your porch.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then you're like, wow, good things already happening.
Yeah.
And the Meeks are all like, I'm not sure if that is. Okay, you
It
guys
happens
remember
that
having
quick.
that
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah.
Okay. Flash forward 9 hours. So I'm on the phone with Meeks, and we're in the middle of this call. And I get a text message from my friend, Catherine. Now,
I
if you
remember.
notice, the last time I talked to Catherine was a week before Thanksgiving. All right, I have not spoken to her now in going on 4+ months, 5 months. I get a message right at 3:15, the day, and I know how Catherine works. This is not like her.
Right.
This is not. She does not stage things or do things for like a show like this. So I actually think she's talking to the wrong person. Like, are you serious? But that's how she started the message. She's like, she's actually talking to me like she's upset with me because basically her message, I'm just going to read it. Are you serious? God woke me up in the middle of the night to tell me to buy gifts for your stripper friend. I'm guessing she's talking about you because you shared your former life. I ordered her a big oversized sweatshirt that says Jesus loves me and my tattoos, a water bottle that says be still and know I am the Lord, and an ESV study Bible. He even told me to put in that note that this is the kind of clothing and trinkets Jesus would approve of. Let me know how I can get it to you. She says I'm going to bed.
That's awesome.
So at 3:15,
It's so sweet
More
of
gifts.
you.
don't tell me I'm putting $1 into the jar for this, because I just wasn't thinking this was going to So I basically
Holy beep.
responded with, wow, that's very surprising. And
Wow.
she's now joking with me. She's like, I don't know why this couldn't have waited.
That is-
Right. But
That's
But literally,
Woke her up.
I'm going to find out the details, because I ended it with, I understand your assignment, because this stuff happens all the time. When you start to wake up to God,
Start paying attention. Yep.
this is what I mean by weird stuff. I did not call her. And it was I have not contacted her. Something motivated. We've had lots of guests on the show.
Sure.
Something motivated her that day, like right after and while Meeks and I were literally talking about KJ in that moment, about KJ,
See, that's all the good stuff, man.
and boom, it comes in. And Meeks, am I making this up or was this real?
No, not at all.
so weird.
That's
I
wonderful.
was like, I almost fell off my chair. I was like,
Should we
what?
look at it?
Want me to get
Oh,
it
the
for you?
gift?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do
Yeah.
it. Bring it out.
Awesome.
I think she is.
So awesome.
I was going to
That's
meet
so-
her after,
that's
but I think
pretty
she's going
cool.
to come to the mix
I'm not.
because she wanted to meet you.
Well,
All
I
right.
can't. I drove.
There you go.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. Let's see what do we got here.
Goodies, goodies.
Oh,
Oh,
you have it in studio? That's so cool.
Oh, wow.
oh that's cool.
Wow.
Very cool.
Jesus
Yep.
loves me.
Nice comfy sweater.
And my tattoos.
That thing looks
That's
cool, man.
cool.
That is, Catherine. I don't know if
Very
you're
cool,
listening.
Catherine.
That's beautiful.
Awesome.
And it's supposed to be the cup.
Someone
That's
just got
very
herself
nice.
a glass of wine
I feel like
tonight.
it's my birthday.
I know.
My goodness.
To your new life, it is
Hey.
your
Oh,
birthday.
neat. Oh,
All right, Catherine just moved up, and Catherine is a stud, by
Very
the way.
cool.
She's very
That is
much
awesome.
like you've met Catherine.
And
I have
there's
met her, yep.
more. But wait, there's more. There's a student study Bible.
Hey,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
It's weird how
And
people
That
like
is cool.
this is how this stuff works. And Helen, I think I was saying it to
there's a lot of stuff in here.
you'll have
Very
the
nice.
back.
That goes
People
along with
that you don't even know will have your back, and there's more loyalty than in a mafia, literally.
Yeah. Aw.
Dude, all right, now I'm getting a little jealous because
Thank you.
you sure none of that in there says give to Dave?
See, Jesus is looking out
This is
for
really
you.
neat. And then there's
Sending
a letter.
people your
but
way.
I should probably,
Oh yeah.
Yep.
probably read it personally.
Yes.
Let's say.
Well, at least maybe screen it now while I tell you a
Okay.
couple things about
Yeah.
Catherine,
Okay.
because she's got this very similar story to a lot of us at this table.
Oh, that's a big letter. You might
a
want
long
to
one.
wait. Yeah.
Oh, okay. She's
But
yeah.
It's probably personal.
That's
to
a
me
lot of
too.
love. That's
Thank you,
great.
Catherine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
She is an entrepreneur. She's a lawyer, University of Michigan grad. Smart. She also, like we have, has had a good party life. She knows both sides of the fence. She's
Yep.
just as comfortable, dealing on the street as she is in a boardroom. And she's just another person.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to take away her story because I think she's coming on air next week. So,
Ooh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
but she essentially a few years back was given less than 6 months to live, and it was a liver issue, and it was one of those because livers don't repair themselves.
Right.
And I'm probably going to ruin this story, so we got to let her retell it properly. But again, there's some things about this story. This is what got her to something happened to her that was so real. She saw it with her own eyes. She knows it, and it's the difference again between someone telling you they saw a car accident and you seeing it. Very different emotional response, because she's now on this donor list, and she's got the prognosis is wrap up your affairs essentially, and she's like, wow, my life's over. This really turned out, whatever that
don't
does to a
expect that.
person. I have no
Yeah.
idea what that.
Yeah.
And I think she prayed in that moment, because I don't think she was very Christian, or maybe even at all. She'll have to explain that. And something like within a day, because the doctors are coming in and they're basically just saying, that we're just going to wind down your life and blah, whatever dialysis. I don't know exactly what.
Right.
And this nurse comes in at one point, and the nurse's name is Grace, and gives her this message saying, I think you're going to be fine, or something along those lines, and whatever. About an hour or two later, these doctors walk in, and they're like looking at her test results, and they're like, I think we must have made a mistake. And they go back, and they test her again, and they're like, they do not know what has happened, and they're like, your liver function just went from 5% to 90%, and there is no...
Logic.
I have-
There's no logic.
I mean, I know our testing's right. We verified that. We verified this. And Catherine's like, I thought you guys sent Grace in to tell me. And they're like, who's Grace? I'm like, Nurse Grace. She just came in a couple of hours ago to tell me. And they're like, Grace, do you know a Grace?
Oh my God.
And there's no Grace anywhere. So
Wow.
that's the kind of, so that happens to her.
That's
Like when that moment happens where you're like, oh, okay.
It
and
just
someone
got
come and speak with
real.
And a lot of doctors get saved because they see that very thing too. Some just keep attributing it to, random, it's bound to happen.
Yeah.
But come on. If you're going to rely on science to tell you how the world works, you've got to have it explain everything. How does it explain that?
No,
Now-
those are the.
That
Right.
ties into what we're going into, which is also, KJ, you're having a good day today. We got one more thing for you. So I've been wanting to get this thing on. Has anyone ever seen the water experiments by
With
Maruto
music?
Emoto? What was his name?
Yes.
Dr. Emoto.
Masaru Emoto. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
All you guys have all seen this.
No.
Classic.
I've seen
What, when they
something
fill the
about
different
it
levels of the cups up?
where it
Is that what
shows
it is?
frequency or
no,
music.
You use the frequency
vi-
to change the
Yeah,
water.
Oh,
frequencies.
okay.
When you speak, it changes the vibrations of energy.
Oh.
Okay. That was unbelievable. So this is the guy. He was a photographer, and he started doing these experiments of taking microscopic photographs. And he discovered this on accident. He discovered that water subjected to positive thoughts. And we're going to actually show you images of what happens to water when it is exposed to different thoughts and different prayers. This is really interesting because I discovered something I did not know yesterday. Water that's subjected to positive thoughts formed beautiful crystals, and water exposed to negative thoughts formed either no crystals or these heinous looking things. So KJ a few weeks ago had said, you'd made this intuitive comment that feelings is behind matter. And, you know, I just go into science mode immediately, go, no, it's matter, man, magnetic fields and stuff. But you are actually more right than not, because let's take a look at some of these images. But actually, this paragraph right here, Charles, is what you were talking about. And this blows me away. His further research showed that different thoughts could be stored in water and have a positive effect on the human body, just as he experienced with the removal of his foot pain. Lots of people think this is ridiculous, like I would have. I don't anymore, because there's a lot more things going on in this world that we don't understand. And he also talks about magnetic fields and other forms of energy that are a lot more important than gas. Just a few examples. Heavy metal music, kind of distorted. You're screaming, I hate you, I will kill you. Now keep in mind, if you have negative thoughts about yourself,
Yep.
and you realize our body is 70% water,
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
because
Dave.
you're Captain Positive over here.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this, like, when you imagine things, you can actually, for instance, improve your coordination at catching a football by imagining yourself catching a football.
That's true.
Because the little synapses that are used for that activity are actually, they're now communicating, and they're getting strengthened.
It's like working out.
It's like, yeah, when your coach said, dude, you got to envision the game. This is what they're talking about. So by the time you actually play in the game, every play has already happened in your head. It's not like you're not in undiscovered territory. Do you understand?
I
Yes.
live manifestation. In the morning when I wake up, I plan my day out by thinking about awesome things that could happen.
Yeah, the good.
See, there
I
you
like
go.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a few examples there. Music that seems to be appealing to water, like Bach works.
What does the one on the bottom there say?
Which one?
The one that looks like a snowflake.
This one, Fujiwara Dam. That was after a prayer. So on the
After
left,
prayer.
this image right here is, so this dam breaks and it kills and Meigs, maybe you could tell us about Fujiwara Dam, but something bad happened to it. He studied the water crystals from that event, and that's what this box is. And then a prayer was offered over them. And what type of prayer is important? Because I believe this guy was a Buddhist. And we're going to look at something that blew me away. I had to double check this. But it's weird. A prayer, and I can tell you this, there are times where, I mean, it's sometimes not as effective as like a Vicodin, but there are times where a prayer makes you feel better, like literally, palpably.
It's kind of weird. That image kind of looked like a brain scan. No, go back up to the one. Yeah. The one that you were saying is for a prayer.
Yeah.
The snowflake looking one. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just weird.
Is this one? The Adolf Hitler one looked like it actually had a picture of a dude in it. You can't see, but that's like his nose. That's his eye. There's his other eye. That's
What
the
it-
bridge of his nose.
They call it Adolf Hitler. That's just what they're
No,
calling
that's
it.
the word they use. So what he did in these experiments is he'd bring these actors in, and they wouldn't even necessarily, so they're acting the emotions. Now, we're going to still feel a little bit, even
Okay,
when
okay,
acting.
gotcha.
But he'd bring these actors in to say, I love you, or I hate you, or Adolf Hitler, or whatever. And as he's doing it, he's photographing what happens to these water crystals at just at a cellular, atomic or subatomic level.
Wow.
So here's the one that I thought was interesting, and I had to like double check this. So when you, I don't know if this was thoughts or words, but when you're surrounded, when you're with someone that actually cares about you and loves you, even if they're saying nothing, you're going to feel good. Now, do you guys ever have a feeling, have you ever been in a relationship where when someone walks into a room, it's like your hair stands up a little bit?
Yeah.
You guys remember
Oh,
that?
yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if what's going on underneath is maybe this. So here's an interesting one. So in the upper right-hand corner, you've got this water molecule that's in good shape. Then they do a Buddhist prayer over it. And look what happens to it. It goes ugly.
Weird.
Wow.
Huh. So maybe the type of prayer matters.
Yeah.
And if this is any reflection of how God works and what he thinks of the Buddhist prayer, and maybe he does control things at a very small level like the Bible said, maybe that's his way of showing anyone that might run into this picture that if you think the Zen and the Kundalini, and it's close, don't get me wrong,
But it's
but
off.
you may as
Yeah.
well miss by a mile.
Yep.
But can I say something? Because I love the Buddhists. I think that maybe that person didn't have good emotions when they were praying, and maybe they were in a mean or negative vibration while they were praying. So you can't really judge the whole thing. With a
Interesting.
Buddhist, when you're
You
a
know
Buddhist,
what?
it lets go of your pain, and you're really more happy.
Guys,
So
we
that
should
person
do
might
our
not be
own
happy.
experiment. We should set up a rice experiment and try it, and set up an anger rice and a love rice and a Buddhist rice and a Jesus rice.
A what?
Rice?
Rice.
Like rice-a-roni?
Oh yeah, because they did rice experiments instead of water, and they told things to the rice, like good things, and then they screamed at the rice and said, "I hate you, rice." And then they recorded the mold that grew on the rice.
Yeah,
Nothing
weird.
grew.
Oh, I thought you
Wow.
were going to say the rice turned into a Maserati. I'm like, sweet! Discount. I'm like,
Imagine how crazy
I'd
people
like
would think we're
400
sitting there
crates of
talking
rice,
about rice
please.
bowl.
Oh, yeah. Well,
You're a
you've heard.
good bowl of rice. Oh, look at you. You're awesome. You're going to have a great day, Rice.
Well,
No,
you
that's
hear.
what they did. It's instead of water, they used rice, and the results are very similar, Dave. It's just
Yeah.
this
no,
mold.
I've seen, and there are unbelievable formations formed based on the frequency. So let's look at what happens to water when it's subjected to frequency. Now, the fact that, I don't know, maybe you guys all have all seen this, and this is, but for me, this is like, wow, I had not seen this until probably 2 months ago. And if you really think about this, what this vibration can do to this water, if you really think about it and understand physics and how energy can't be lost, it can be. This proves that we should have water-driven automobiles. Let's just see what a guy did in his home, in his backyard with this water thing. We don't need sound for it. I think we're just going to see it. So this guy sets up this vibrating thing in his house. 'Cause he's going to show us what happens to water when it is subjected to all these different frequencies. And I was blown away that you can make water do this with sound.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen this before?
No.
I haven't seen this.
I
Look at
have.
this.
It's amazing.
Wow.
I've seen that
Oh.
one, yeah.
Think about that. Now, the people we're up against
That's
have had this
wild.
technology for thousands of years, and they've hid it away from us. Who knows what it's going to come out, but
Oh man.
That's crazy.
I
is
mean,
that not nuts?
Yeah,
looks like a
that's
Fukushima to me. I mean,
That's
if it's on
awesome.
a military level, why couldn't you
I,
push a?
I
why
lost my
couldn't
mind
you
when I saw this for the first time. I was
create a
like,
tidal
well,
wave?
jeez, man, why didn't we learn about this in science class? Frequencies was not in the conversation at all. No talk of frequencies.
I
and
know.
how-
Because
I
that
mean, it's just-
actually, I think that's where that's going to be the technology used against us that's going to seem like it is from another world. Because it's going to
Right.
be so foreign to us. Why? Because even people that study this junk all day long don't. I mean, this to me is astounding that this exists.
Well,
That
I've
this
said
is
it.
a thing.
Yeah, I've seen their LRADs or microwave weapons that it's a sound that'll make you sick to your stomach. They use them in prisons where they'll drop you to the floor. They don't ever have to put their hands on you. But when you look at something like this, I mean, look what you could do. I mean, if it's really on a military level, you could create a tidal wave.
And again, if our bodies are 70% water, I mean,
Well,
gosh,
yeah. What's that, Meeks?
And if our bodies are mostly water, think about how frequencies
Wow.
are affecting the water in our bodies. And that's why people are really up in arms about 5G now, but that's a whole other conversation. But certainly frequencies and electromagnetism, Tesla technology certainly should have had a more of a prevalence in our 6th grade science education, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But they keep it from us. They really do.
Go ahead. Yeah, Tony?
There's
Helen, while Tony talks, will you get if you can, a sheet of paper and a pencil for everyone?
Meigs, there's a medical procedure. It's kind of weird. It kind of looks like Scientology auditing, the machine you do, but it runs frequencies through your body. And then what they could do is it'll pick up all these things in kind of like a computer program, and they have frequency water that they'll send to you, so let's say you're having gallbladder issues. It'll be something specifically frequencied to that issue to try to push it out of your body.
They can both heal and harm with it. And their technology is the point now where they can target DNA types, blood types. And I think they can even go down to the individual when you consider the chemtrail nanos that we have all over us that identify us. But essentially, if they want to just disrupt you, put you in a bad mood, make you cranky, they can do it, and you'll never know what's happening.
Wow.
Richard Lighthouse is a guy that talks a lot about this, about how they do this in relation to targeted individuals. But that's a whole other issue.
I see that nano is essentially creating us as our own 5G, where they could bounce the signals off of us, you know what I mean, to keep that type of a signal.
If this is true, I have got a great reason for the 200 times I have lost my temper in the last 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
I might be
that's it.
I might be clear.
Yeah.
Psychological warfare.
Okay. You know what an Ouroboros is, Meeks?
Yes, it's a cult symbol. It's a snake eating itself. And I think it represents birth and rebirth, and I'm not exactly sure. I know it's very occulty.
It's like the Egyptian equivalent of the infinity sign. It is a demonic symbol. It comes right out of Satan has had 6 kingdoms, major ones that the Bible talks about. And if you look at all of the common imagery and symbolism, the stuff that we look at, all of it comes just from those 6 kingdoms.
Shall we talk about this?
We've got the Babylonian eagle.
You have it?
Oh, I mean,
the
are you guys
snake.
hungry for a pretzel all of a sudden?
Tell me that's not weird, though. Isn't that bizarre?
No, and that's why
I have
people
the
that are
Orin
on one side of
on
it, the
my back.
spiritual.
The Orin.
When did you get that thing done?
Orin.
About 8 years ago.
So what does the orange mean?
The Orin is the symbol from the movie The Never-Ending Story.
Okay.
the kid wears it around his neck.
Okay.
That's the only
Yeah,
reason I got it.
they
It has
got
nothing
that
to do
from
with like satanic
Right,
anything. Unfortunately. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I'm not that evil.
So when you
Or
look
am
at
I?
when you look at all of the myriad of symbols that these guys use, at the end of the day, all the symbols trace back to really one of 4 places. And it's Babylon, where you've got the eagle, the raven, the phoenix, that's where that came from. The Greek gods, which were nothing more than demons fighting each other for power. And that's how Satan operates his system, human side and demonic side. I don't think those were mythical wars. I actually think those were more real.
Spiritual wars?
And no, those were like, they manifested as like actual war, visible to human eye. The writings of Socrates, Aristotle, the Greek tragedy writers. And I read this when we were doing the quotes book that we were just drawn from, because I would have never read Aristotle. I mean, come on, dude, put a gun to my head, please. But that stuff was fascinating, and they were either crazy, like we are, or they really believed that there are these entities that are dark. Jesus Christ had not shown up on the scene yet. The Hebrews were there. And it's interesting because even like Marcus Aurelius, who is the emperor of Rome, about 100+ years after Jesus was in town. And in the beginning of his writings, he's talking about pleasing the many gods, making the right sacrifices to the right God so he can win some battle. And you're now dipping into the dark side, and you're just hoping that your dark angel or your white witch is more powerful than the spirit summoned from the other one. And that's really all you're banking on. I mean,
yeah. A lot of wars are
and at
fought
the
that
end
way.
of the day, the spirit that is in, like you and Meigs, for instance, is just a way, way, way more powerful spirit. And just wait till we're going to give you a bunch of testimonies from people that were in witchcraft, that were warlocks, they would summon up these. Who's that one dude we were talking about, Meigs? They will summon up.
Oh, it was an ex-Satanist. There's so many testimonies of ex-Satanists that are worth listening to that have become born-again Christians because they realized they could not send demons that would attack Christians. They were summoning up demonic entities, literally, who would not go after Christians.
Yeah, this guy was the head of a coven, and there's a lot of stories like this, and his name escapes me. We'll put a little snippet in to our episode. But this guy was lifelong in the dark arts, plain and simple. And some woman down the street called the cops while they were having a party one night, and they had a noise violation party shut down, and they were pissed, so they were going to get back at the girl, back at this woman. They summoned the spirit, whatever you do. I don't even want to. I don't even like to repeat in research.
Yeah,
by the way,
The Book of Necronomicon.
yeah, the Necromonicon.
Yeah, I can't even say it.
So the spirit goes over and is about to mess with this person's life, and we'll get into the details of how they do that later. But instead, this thing comes back, pissed off, basically going, "Don't you ever send me to a Christian's house again." And in that moment, this guy converted. He's like, "Whoa, wait a minute. This Christianity is more powerful. Those spirits are more." And then he knew the spiritual world was real. He just thought he was on the right side. And God loves pure hearts. I mean, who was God's greatest disciple? Jesus' greatest disciple. Meigs, who would you say it is?
Peter?
Well, I don't know. Peter is a good Paul, probably.
What did Paul, before he was Paul, what was he called?
Saul.
Right, Saul of Tarsus. And what was his job?
Fisherman.
He was a killer of Christians.
Think about it.
Was a murderer.
Doesn't make sense. Why would God go convert someone as a killer of Christians?
He wants to show us that there's no sin.
That's actually. This is he wasn't before Christ. He was after. So Paul is doing his thing in roughly 60 to 90 AD. He knew, I don't know if he knew Christ personally. He knew all the disciples. And this guy worked for the Pharisees. I mean, his job was, the Pharisees would say, "Hey, these Christians are heretics. Go kill them." And Saul of Tarsus is like, "Okay." See, and this is why we don't even have the capability to judge humans. See, because the intent of his heart was to do good, and he was killing people, but he was murdering God's people. But God will look at someone like that and
Following
go,
orders.
"You have a pure heart. Like, you're not a." Do you understand? There's purity in that. He was trying
Following
to do
orders.
the right thing.
Yeah, you're a soldier.
Jesus appears to him, messes up his life, and he completely flips. The greatest executioner of the day of Christians becomes probably the greatest writer in the history of the Bible. I mean, he wrote more than anybody. I think. Right, Meigs, would you say?
Yeah.
He wrote more books than anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, any comments on anything so far?
back to what Horace was saying, or Charles. If Christians prior to Christ, so they've still been a Christian following Moses, or I thought that was all Jewish.
Well, Charles is right. There were no Christians following Christ because what became the Christians, by and large,
Gentiles.
were the Hebrews. I mean, the Hebrews are just basically the Hebrews haven't changed, but the people that believed that Jesus was the Messiah are now called Christians. But we were all Hebrews,
So these are those that believed before Christ.
right?
Before
This would
Christ
have.
was here. I mean, before he
I don't know
revealed
who would-
himself.
Who are these that? Which ones are we talking? Like the people that lined up Jerusalem when
Well,
Jesus walked in?
Jesus the Baptist, John the Baptist is baptizing people before he realized who Christ was. So he was still baptizing people to God,
There were.
Holy Spirit. Right?
There is decent historical evidence. I mean, the Bible implies it, but there was a line of people that knew the day that the Messiah would be walking into Jerusalem, and they were lining the streets, the path that he used to enter, which was predicted, I think, in Isaiah or Daniel. So they knew where to be and what day to be there. And he did. Now, this one is easy to counterfeit, but he did go get a donkey and rode in on a donkey, which at the time I'm thinking, this makes no sense, but I totally understand why now. And the same thing that was going on then is going on today. Some people believe the Bible and some don't, because Satan was around then and he's still around today, and he's got an interest in us not believing it. So he's working on a big deception, which we're going to start to talk about, because NASA, I think, is a very big part of it.
Huge.
All right.
Hugely.
Meeks last week said Columbia is everywhere. It is.
Now, how bizarre is it that article just popped up on my Facebook page the next day
Which one?
about the girl who posed for the Columbia Pictures?
Oh, yeah.
Just random. I get on Facebook the day after we're speaking of this. Now that ties into like how they're listening to us through
To
our
your
phones and
phones.
whatnot.
Yep.
If you're on alert
Yeah.
a little bit,
Because bam, there it was.
or
It could be more, but
I don't know how all this works, but I leave my YouTube playing at night, and I can't tell you how many answers I get. And it's funny, around 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, and all of a sudden, I know, that's when all the covens go send out all their
I know.
people to go F with
I have to
everybody.
do the jazz hands when I say it.
But when I wake up, my mind's the most active like the first 15 minutes. All types of, whether they're from dreams or just that my mind's waking up, so I have to think about my day. My first 15 minutes are pretty powerful.
This is not a schedule. Like
Okay.
I'll be exhausted. This happened probably 30 times on our last show, where something wakes me up at 2 or 3 a.m. and I've got this thing. I got to write it down, and it'll be an hour. I get a whole show written, and I'm back asleep. And I remember being up, but I go back to read what I was, and I'm like, wow, I don't even remember writing that. Like, it's
I write
strange.
songs that way. A lot of times when I'm trying to go to sleep, my brain will just come up with a song. Okay, So
Write
I
it
think
down,
your
get it
brain
out of your
becomes
head.
active when you're trying to shut it down. It goes into its own.
Well,
world.
whenever I try to fall asleep, I start to wake up.
Yeah, it's
I
weird.
should start drinking coffee at night to fall asleep.
Of course, it probably has a reverse effect.
Great idea. Okay, we all remember the Columbia disaster, correct?
Yep.
Space shuttle breaks up. We all saw the thing flying over Texas, yada, yada. All right, here's a little game here. I want you guys to write down, you're the editor of your local city's paper, all right? There's just been this shuttle disaster. I want you to write down the headline you're going to put in your paper, 5 words or less. I need each of you to do this.
Shuttle.
What do we gotta do?
Yeah, I'm trying to fully understand too the headline of the shuttle incident.
So you're the editor of the newspaper. The space shuttle just crashed, okay? You are making the headline for tomorrow's paper. 5 words or less. It's going to be a big headline, obviously. This is a big event.
Okay.
What does the headline say? This show comes with music built in.
There it is.
I don't know.
Teamwork.
Okay, Meeks, do you have a headline?
Disaster of the year, Columbia crashes. Although that's more
Okay,
than
that's
fireworks.
okay. That's okay. Okay, so disaster of the year, Columbia crashes. Tony, what's yours?
Space shuttle explodes in flight.
Okay, what do we got over here?
Tragedy in U.S. NASA flight. I don't know.
And the world,
Okay.
And the world is silent.
The world is
It's
silent.
Ah, that's
Now-
pretty good.
At Raina's newspaper. Here's what they're going to read. The world is S, you chicken mother.
Well, it's supposed to
The
be
world is a
No,
vampire,
we
though.
didn't give her time to write. Okay, 5 different right? Bunch of
Yep.
different headlines. That sounds reasonable.
Plausible. Yeah.
Now, I've seen this happen many, many times before. I just didn't know that it happened for the Columbia. So, remember, we've already talked about how the media is coordinated. They're owned by a single entity. There is
5.
I'm going to show you something that's beyond statistical probability, even if some of these newspapers are owned by the same parent company. Okay, San Diego Union Tribune. Columbia is lost, right? Sounds good. Chicago Tribune. The Columbia is lost. Los Angeles Times. Columbia is lost.
Weird.
Wow.
There's the Union Tribune. Columbia is lost. The Times Union. Columbia is lost. The Times. Columbia lost. So then I get to George Bush, and I think this is where your eye, people go, what does it mean you're spiritually waking? Or give me an example. This is an example. Because I come across, when I'm looking for this, it's, George Bush's speech about Columbia. And before I heard the speech, I already knew what is he going to say in his speech, word for word.
Columbia is lost.
He is going to find a way to specifically say those words. So our audience might not be able to hear this one, but I'm going to play it for you guys in the hopes that you do. It's like in the first 30 seconds. And we got no sound. Oh, here
There
we
it
go.
is.
What happened?
He was there.
We'll pick it up right as he says it. Just watch.
Wonder what happened.
Having some tick on the sound.
You'll have to
guys.
trust me on that
Yeah.
one. 30 seconds into the speech,
Columbia's lost.
he starts talking. I'm like, oh my God, he's not going to say it. And then he stops everything, moment of drama, and he says, the Columbia is lost. And I'm like, you little stinkers.
Oh, this was in his. No, wasn't it? This is the second. The Challenger was the first.
Correct. This is
Okay,
the second
I'm
shuttle
with
that
ya.
blew up over Texas.
Gotcha.
The Challenger was over Florida.
Okay.
Interesting little things to notice like that. You guys remember the Phoenix Lights?
I do. Arizona.
I never verified this. I just trusted what Chuck Missler said about it. So check into it for yourselves. And I always say this.
Chuck
Do your
Messler?
own Missler, Chuck Missler. Best teacher ever. He used to be the head of the River Rouge plant here in Detroit.
Okay.
He's a former Fortune 500 CEO. He went to UCLA, Navy man, engineering, PhD, CEO of Western Digital, military defense contractor.
Okay.
So, Bible's real, becomes a Bible, but he does it through science, man. It is. That is for me, my favorite of all time.
So what about it? What about the Phoenix Lights?
Phoenix Lights. This thing happens. You guys all remember? Does anyone not remember the Phoenix Lights?
I'm not super
Yeah, I'm
familiar with
aware.
the Phoenix Lights.
The entire city of Phoenix goes nuts because this massive UFO, and I want to say it was 1997, Meigs,
It's pretty late.
flies over the city, and everyone, I mean, the governor, doctors, everyone, there
Families.
is no effing doubt, and every local news station's covering it, but national store, not covering it, not covering it, not
Correct.
covering it. I want to say this happened in like March of 97. But there's so much buzz going on. I mean, there's hundreds of news campers parked in Phoenix. National's not covering it. They're not covering it. And then suddenly, and I want to say it was June 26th of 1997. And I don't know why I'm giving you these dates, but I have a feeling that's it. If it is, that's from upstairs because I don't even remember.
March 13th, 1997. Wow.
And when did the news come out? Maybe June 4th or something like that.
Oh.
And what happened is on the exact same day, every newspaper, every television station, every national network suddenly began to cover the story simultaneously at the exact same time.
At the press conference? Because the press conference is where the guy put on the alien outfit.
No, this was like he
Made a
got
mockery of it.
bombarded for that.
Yeah.
The governor made fun of it, and a lot of people were pissed
They were
because
super
they
pissed
actually
because
saw,
they saw
something,
this
and I'm like,
thing.
he regretted doing that, and
And he admitted as much, right? In the future.
the important thing to take of this is that our media is absolutely coordinated on what stories they will run
Yep.
and what stories they won't. And enough pressure developed where they had to address this because not addressing it was starting to turn into the elephant in a room. All right, so origins of NASA. Meeks, what does NASA mean?
Do you mean the acronym or in Hebrew?
I want the Syrian Aramaic, the Syriac version. This-
Okay.
Now this
Actually,
would
I
have probably
looked it up.
been. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. It's kind of a misnomer or
Just give me the two-word answer.
Okay, it means to deceive, but
Okay.
it that's not correct though. It's
Oh, really?
nashah.
Keep going. Then what does it
Nashah
mean?
means to deceive. But it's close. That's the point.
What does it mean?
Nashah means to deceive. It's not NASA, but it's close.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got you. There are NASA spellings of it, which you can find. The language that NASA or Nasha would mean to deceive in probably would have been the first language on it, the language that was Moses. This is essentially the Aramaic.
Aramaic.
So yeah,
To deceive?
I think it is God's language. Just sort of interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think NASA, the history begins in whenever they were formed. 50s, 60s? Meigs, why don't you
Late
figure that one out?
50s, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was late 50s.
Let me look
What
it
time do
up.
we have right now? Okay, we got, 20 minutes or so?
1958 is when it was.
58.
What year? 1958. Okay. I think you can actually track, because we are going to be covering NASA and what's in our skies. We're going to be on this for about 4 episodes here.
Awesome.
So it's going to take a while because this is going to be, this is where so much of like the meat and potatoes is of what we talk about. So before the Holy Quran, Book of Enoch, something interesting happens in the Book of Enoch. My opinion is it's absolutely inspired by God. Some people may say otherwise. I'll defend the book later, but we're just playing here, and this is just my personal theory, all right? Tying all this together. The Book of Enoch does say, however, that the Watcher Angels, the one that corrupted all the DNA on Earth, that required God to essentially wipe this experiment out except for 8 people on that boat. How funny that there are 8 blood types today. They survive. He replenishes Earth. Kabam. Now, those 200 Watcher Angels had a very specific punishment. And a lot of people just group all demons together. And there are so many different kinds, and they're treated very differently, different responsibilities, different punishments in different places for different amounts of time. But these particular angels, which were the ones that brought the technology to Earth, the kind of technology, they literally talk about vibrations and they don't mention magnets in the Bible.
Harmonics.
But I think they knew the technology that makes the water do what we just saw do. So God says your punishment is you are going to be locked up in chains for 70 generations. Now, there are different places. You can get a different generation. You can get it
Time
at 40
span.
years, 70 years, or 100 years. You can make a case that there are different readouts for how long a generation is. But what's interesting is this happened right at the time of the flood, because their punishment basically came at flood time, because the flood happened because of what they did. And God was obviously this was a second rebellion in heaven.
Oh,
And-
what the angels did, not man. Or
Well, he was mad at man too. I mean,
Gotcha.
or I should say he was grieved. That's what he said. And God, when I read that passage, my heart sank when God said he was sorry that he had made man because we were such F-ups. Still are.
Yeah.
Good catch.
But I
Locusts of the
think he
world.
is actually right now, because the angels are watching all of this unfold, and he's going to basically show how this bunch of Cretans, humanity, are going to get cleaned for heaven. And because he does that. He shows his glory by throwing these Hail Marys all the time. That's why I call him Hail Mary. He does it every single time. So these Watcher Angels get locked up. Now, this would have been about 3000 BC, give or take, okay? And there are, of course, some geologists that say there was no flood and things like the Grand Canyon happened, a drop of water over 1 billion years. And then the other school that breaks from, hey, what the education mainstream taught us, they're like, no, actually, this whole thing this was immediate. It was, we got animals trapped that shouldn't be trapped together, blah, blah, things that just cannot be explained, that this does not hold water. 70 generations. At 70 years a pop is what? 4,900 years? 70 times 70? Come on, people. Thank you. All right. So if the flood's roughly 3000 BC, when do these Watcher Angels get out? Meigs?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure the exact.
We don't have time to wait for you to figure it out. It would be 1900 AD.
Ah.
4,000. If you're in 3000 BC and they have to wait 4,900 years, it's 3,000 years to the year zero, and then another 1,900 years to 4,900, right? Well, that puts us at 1900. So here's what's interesting. And now these
That's a theory.
angels, these are the ones that this would have been right before the Tower of Babel. I mean, when I say right before, a few hundred years before. And we start to see their symbology everywhere. So what's interesting is 1900 rolls around, and we're basically an agrarian society. We don't really, there is an very industrial revolution. But who was into the occult in the 1920s and 30s? I mean, what was the biggest occultic country?
Wow.
Germany, maybe?
Yeah, Nazi Germany. All right? All over the occult. I mean, Hitler was certain that he was being visited by a divine being. Now, I believe he was being visited by a divine being, but it was a demonic one, not. And they can look like angels of light. Because Germany in 1923 is as powerful as Ethiopia today. Bankrupt, starvation, lines to get food. They've got inflation that is escalating at such a rate. If you get in line for a loaf of bread with $1 million, by the time you reach the front of the line,
It's
the
$1.5
loaf costs $5 million.
Yeah.
It was a decimated nation. Yet, within 10 years, that country went essentially from bicycles in 1923 to splitting the atom by the 1930s. They already had a nuclear program. And who were they getting funded by? Well, we know who they were getting funded by, right? The central bankers. The Prescott Bushes, the father Prescott Bush, who were on, again, they didn't start doing this recently. They've been doing it throughout history. They're on both sides of this war.
Ford, GM, IBM.
So the Nazi, this is still theory. So the Nazis do their thing. Okay, we're going to pick up with the Nazis in a minute. Now, we just went from 3000 BC, the origins of NASA. Now let's pick it up at 632 AD. What happened in 632 AD?
632. I don't know.
I know this. I don't know this knowledge.
Quran comes out.
Okay.
So it's written over a long period of time. It's given to Muhammad, supposedly by God, through the angel. They call him Jibril. It's actually Gabriel is our name for him. And here again, for reasons we're not going to get into, I am heavily certain that Muhammad did, in fact, talk to a divine entity. Here again, it wasn't from heaven. This was demonic. And there's a prophecy in the Quran. So Muhammad is considered the prophet. And it's Surah 54, 1-3. Meigs, has anyone here ever read this before?
I have not read the Quran.
There are not very many prophecies in the Quran, and I am no Quran expert. Like, I basically picked it up, read a few passages, and researched. I cannot tell you how close to the Bible it is. We're going to look at a couple.
A lot about Jesus in there, I've heard.
Oh, he's all over it.
Yeah.
They're not trying to take Jesus out of the picture. They're just trying to steer the conversation that Jesus isn't the guy. He's one
He's a
of the
prophet.
guys. And if you give me enough time, we're going to get there, but we're going to be
Okay.
tight. So in the Quran, there's this prophecy. It says, "The hour has come closer and the moon has split. Then they that saw a miracle, but they turned away and said, old magic. They disbelieved, followed their own opinions, and adhered to their old traditions." Okay. Now, my opinion is this right here is evidence that Satan himself was working on a faked moon landing that he knew would be fake back in 632 AD. And I'm going to tie it into something that it's just one of those things. I mean, really? Can this really be a coincidence? Really? And I'm going to read you the transcript from the book. Muslims believe the Quran was revealed by God to Muhammad by the angel Gabriel from December of 609 through 632 AD when Muhammad died. This is one of the few prophecies in the Quran. Chapter 54 is titled The Moon, and it indicates the splitting of the moon is a sign that the end of the world is drawing close. Some people, where was I? Some people believe that when the Apollo 11 astronauts picked up that lunar rock and the orbiter departed the moon was when that prophecy was fulfilled. A lot of people already think we're in the last days. Now, here's what's super interesting. Because that, now, and you will find this is predictive program, this might be corroborative programming. So this appeared in Surah 54:1, okay? That at some point in the future, part of the moon is going to leave the moon. It's going to split. It's going to be torn apart. Doesn't say the amount. It's not in half necessarily. So when the time that NASA announced to the world in 1969, when this orbiter pops off the little launch pad, and somehow there's a cameraman to follow the thing up there, which we'll talk about later. Or they had servos installed in that camera, but they didn't for the next two missions, but then they whatever. It was 17:54 and 1 second universal time, which at NASA HQ, Cape Canaveral, Florida, the East Coast, it was 1:54 p.m. in the afternoon, 1:54 and 1 second. That was the official time reported by NASA. It was at 54:1 on the 54th minute and the first second of the hour, which is right in the same. That's just sort of. So from a Muslim perspective,
got it.
Holy cow! This means our book is legitimate, because guess what is circulating now in the Muslim world is that, hey, we can trust our God. He can do these types of prophecies, and he got it down to the minute. But if you can start to understand that now, and what does the rest of it say? Then they saw a miracle, but they turned away and said old magic. See, I think that's what we are, because we don't necessarily believe we really went to the moon. And I think it was done with, like, i.e., maybe what is called old magic in 632 AD is special effects today.
We're going to have to remember where we were because we have to cut it up.
All right, we're going to pick this up then. We're going to pick this up at the Quran in this passage. We're going to show some other passages that start to talk about, and I read it right underneath this passage. If you see the two little we's at the bottom, you start to see where the name Jesus is being replaced by Jesus is one of us. He is a we, which matches the ascended master's story that we're getting through thousands of channeling specialists all over Earth over the last 20 or 30 years.
Thank you to everybody who listened.
Wow.
And
You
watched
guys,
today. Yeah.
at the end of the day, all of this stuff, you got to find out. It doesn't matter how close you come if you don't go all the way. Jesus is not one of the good guys. He's not one of the best. That is not even a possibility to choose from. He is either the Son of God, he was insane, or he was a liar. Those are your only three choices. And your eternal soul depends on what your thoughts are about that.
All right.
And we'll leave
Well
it at that.
put.
And we will
Great.
be
We'll be back next week.
Yes.
Take
Boom.
care.
Take
Love
care.
you guys.
Bye, Meeks.
Bye.
Bye,
Adios,
audience.
amiga.
Bye, guys.
Yes.
See you next week.
Bye.
Excellente.
Charles, thanks for the pooter.
Great job.
The pooter.
Somehow I misplaced your number. I would have been called you. So I gotta get you.